Okay, great. Thank you so much for your patience, and I really apologize for the problems that I was having sharing the screen. But I just wanted to share a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing at Rowan University in the area of spatial skills, both in some of the research that we've done on the spatial skills of engineering students and with a focus on a training program that we've developed and some of the lessons that we've learned from the implementation. Next slide. So in case you're not familiar, spatial skills are a cognitive ability, the capacity to understand, remember, and transform the orientation among different visual images. And we're focusing our research on mental rotation, which is a certain type of spatial skill, the ability to rotate a 2- or 3-dimensional figure rapidly and accurately as a whole. So when we say as a whole, we're talking about rotating the whole object instead of sort of envisioning different parts of the object and kind of taking it apart and rotating the different pieces. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to provide a little bit of background and importance of spatial skills to explain the motivation for our studies. So spatial skills are developed through academic and non-academic experiences. And there are differences in spatial ability that relate to gender, culture, and socioeconomic status. Next slide. So spatial skills development begins at a very early age, and it continues on into adulthood. And it occurs through a variety of academic and non-academic activities. One of the big ways that people learn spatial skills is by playing with Legos and other kind of manipulatives that children play with. But spatial skills can also be learned through sports, through reading maps, playing video games, as well as some academic subjects. Next slide. So the implications are that, since spatial skills the development of spatial skills depends so much on the activities that children do when they're growing up and young adults, it turns out that there are very strong cross-cultural variations and strong intercultural variation associated with gender roles, socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, and probably a variety of other groups or factors. Next slide. So spatial skills are strongly linked with success in STEM, and improving spatial skills increases academic performance and retention in STEM. There have been a variety of studies that have focused on these two statements. So I'll share some results from a previous study in a moment. Next slide. Okay. So this is a study that was done by Cheryl Sorby and her colleagues at Michigan Tech University. They did spatial skills research for a number of years at Michigan Tech. And so they tested all of the first-year engineering students when they entered the program. And this shows the graduation rate of those students who passed the spatial skills pretest with a score of over 70%. So that's pretty good. And it compares the graduation rate to the rate for the students who failed the spatial skills pretest, which we're taking to be a score of less than 60%. And they didn't do that group didn't do any training to improve their spatial skills. They just went on, and their graduation rate was significantly lower, around 40%, as compared with 70% for the students who had the stronger spatial skills. Now, if you just advance the arrow, the slide is animated. Okay, and compare that to students who failed but took a course to improve their spatial skills training. Their graduation rate was significantly higher, and it was, in fact, quite close to the graduation rate of the students who had the strong spatial skills to begin with. And then there's one more group, if you advance one more arrow. And that's the students who they sort of marginally passed. They got between 60 and 70% on the pretest. They did not take any training, and they did a little bit better than the group with weaker spatial skills that didn't do training, but nowhere near as good as the other two groups. So this is just one of the studies they did. They also looked at the relationship between spatial skills and academic performance, grades in different classes, and there are very strong links. There are other links with disciplines outside of engineering. Spatial skills is really important in a number of STEM fields. Next slide, please. Okay, so the implications for STEM is that spatial skills, having poor spatial skills may put some groups at risk for poor academic performance. And these are the groups that are already underrepresented in STEM. So women, we've seen this universally, regardless of the culture that the women are from. The nationality, this is probably due to cultural differences and differences in activities growing up, socioeconomic status, and race and ethnicity. Next slide, please. So the last background point is that spatial skills can be taught in a relatively short amount of time. And this has been demonstrated by different studies related to different training programs to improve spatial skills. Next slide. Okay, so I had previously shown some data for Michigan Tech, and this, they've done a longitudinal study, and by far, I think it's the most extensive of any studies that have been performed in engineering. So we kind of use this as the gold standard when we compare our training to the Michigan Tech training. So theirs is a direct spatial skills training. It's a 10-week, it was originally introduced, and it's gone through some different variations, but it was introduced as a 10-week course with 2 hours of lecture, 2 hours of lab, and it's a full 3-credit course to improve spatial skills. And as you saw in this slide that I showed a couple of minutes ago, they had really good success in improving spatial skills and achieving better academic performance or graduation rate of the students. So it was successful over many years. It improved the scores on the spatial skills test, resulted in better grades in STEM, increased the retention rate, and increased the graduation rate of the students. Next slide, please. So we were convinced that we wanted to do this training at my university, but we ran into a lot of obstacles and other considerations, namely crowded curriculum. Where would we fit an extra course into the curriculum, and having limited resources to offer such a program because it requires an instructor for a full course. So we thought about alternatives, and one of the things that we explored was, could we develop a program that students could do on their own, like an online program that students could do like outside of class time. It wouldn't take instructor time, it wouldn't take the class time. So next slide, please. And there would be some advantages to offering an online training, low resource requirements. We could give a quick introduction during class and then have the students